it'll help be a better CEO, because what happens is you get your finger on the pulse. Like, even if you did it for, 5 hours in 1 month, let's say, and you just like, okay, 1 hour a week, I'm going to do this. You're going to get some responses. You're going to see who doesn't respond. You're going to have that feel of like reaching out and what happens next. And you're.
Everybody, it's Morgan J Ingram here, host of the SDR Chronicles, bringing you motivational tips, tactics, and strategies for your sales development career, your closing sales career, and also for your entrepreneurial ventures as well, because I believe that sales development is the mantra and center point of your career and also of your life, as we use sales development every single day. And so today, I'm actually really fired up for this one. I've seen his journey on this topic we're going to talk about today, and I think it's probably one of the most intriguing journeys that I've seen thus far on LinkedIn. Adam from Siftrock is the CEO, also board member at Visible, has done a lot of cool ventures in entrepreneurship, and he's all over my LinkedIn feed talking about his venture from CEO to SDR. So you guys know this is SDR Chronicles, so I had to bring Adam on to see what his experience was as an SDR coming from a CEO's perspective. So Adam, without any further ado, I'm going to let you talk about why you're excited about this topic today and a little bit more about yourself.
Well, hey, Morgan. Good to talk to you, man. I've been following your stuff for quite a while, so fun to be chatting with you. Yeah, it's kind of like, it was a weird idea. It came about sort of randomly, but, I think it makes sense when I look back on it that we approached it this way. Katie, our director of sales here, and we were sitting around, and as a business, we'd been in a place where inbound was working well for us. We had some paid demand gen that was working well, and we were looking out to like second half of 2018, and we're like, okay, what's going to be the next channel? Wasn't sure if some of these things were going to scale. So we thought, all right, we need to start building out the outbound muscle. And I'd had some experience with outbound in the past. At my last venture, Simply Measured, we built up a sales team. I had some inbound, SD, and outbound. But I didn't feel like I kind of like knew the modern way of outbound. And so I'm like a very hands-on learner, and just had this idea. I'm like, well, before we go hire somebody, we better like understand this a little bit. So why don't I take a couple months? At first it was going to be a month, but I realized I was like not even close to enough time to scratch the surface. Why don't I take a couple of months? I'll do it half time, and we'll learn a bunch, and then we'll figure out where to go next.
Yeah, no, that's super awesome to hear. That was the reasoning behind, okay, like, why are you going into this SDR role? So I think that's like super intriguing, and a story for everyone else is, hey, look, if you can't hire someone, if you can't go find the resources, like do it yourself, put yourself on the ground, because then when you build out that team, you can actually talk from personal experiences on how you were able to do that. So from your experience of being an SDR, what was your favorite channel?
So I focused my efforts on like email primarily,
right.
And a little bit of social. And the reason I did that is because I was only doing it part-time, right? I still had like other duties. So I was like, man, there's no way I'm going to figure out like phone or direct mail and email. Like, I need to hone in on like a smaller set of channels if I'm going to learn anything, because it's so deep you can go into any one thing. So I got really interested in like cold email and how to engage people. And I'm talking about like personalized hands-on keyboard, like go to your profile, like try to learn a bit about you and then engage in a relevant way. I thought that was it's really an interesting channel, and there's a lot of bad stuff out there. So I think if you can have an angle, you can really stand out in the inbox and get a good response rate.
Yeah, there's so many unique triggers out there to really generate response, and there's so much content that people are producing. You can definitely get an edge on most of your competition that you're outreaching to. So as you were doing these different triggers, you were reaching out to different people. Did you find that you had an advantage because you are a CEO of a company and you probably get tons of emails every single day?
Oh, for sure. Of course. I think any good SDR uses their advantages, right? So I used that to my advantage. A couple of things that were an advantage for me, like I have a pretty good network, just because I've been in like the B2B marketing space for a little while. So I could like reference common connections a little bit more and use that to my advantage. So I think that definitely helped along the way. But there's so much out there that you can pick up on, if you don't have a big network, or if you don't have that kind of thing to draw on as well.
Yeah, no, and that's super critical. So from the aspect of you being an SDR, you were learning, you're coming from a CEO perspective. How much respect did you gain from the role as you were in it?
Oh, man, it is like, it's hard. I mean, I think one of the things, as a CEO or a founder, like, people do respond to you more, right? Like you're when you put yourself out there, you get pretty good engagement, whether it's warranted or not, right? Like, but when you kind of go out cold and you're doing this stuff, like, it's a lot of radio silence. It's a lot of ghosting. And I think there's a little bit of a mindset shift there that you have to get used to, and you have to stay focused on like your message and what you're about and who you are. And you can't get lazy. Like when people start, ignoring you, I think like there's probably a knee-jerk reaction just to get lazy, maybe turn on the automation, maybe stop like doing the research or whatever, like what has been working. So that was tough. I gained a lot of respect. And like I said, I only did it part-time and only scratched the surface. So there's so many things that I wasn't even touching. So that I definitely learned that. And another thing we might want to dig in on, man, is the data. I mean, it is so tough. Like the operational challenges of getting set up and getting going, man, I learned a ton about that. That blew my mind. I had no idea it was that hard to just kind of start. Like sending my first email, getting to that point was a while.
It's definitely, it's really tough, as most people think. And I thought when I first got in the SDR role, I thought it was gonna be the easiest thing of all time, because it was like, all right, we have all these tools that can tell me when people read emails. And I had most of the templates when I would enter the Terminus, they were already made. So I was like, okay, all I have to do is sit here and send out emails and then make phone calls. I was like, if you think about it, that's kind of simple. But no, it's definitely like so difficult because no one's responding to you. Everyone's ghosting you. You have to gain attention. You have to get different unique triggers.
Right.
And if your data is bad, you're definitely screwed, because one of the things when I joined John Barrows is I was like, hey, like we need to make sure that the data set is good. So we're reaching out to accounts. I'm not, wasting time on emails that aren't responding. So for you, how did you get your data, and how did you segment that? And how did you streamline your process? Because I feel like a lot of teams do struggle with that process.
Yeah. So I started out with like pretty thin set of data on each prospect. And then I realized like, oh man, then it takes a lot of time to engage. Like either you have a pretty thin personalization if you're going kind of automated touches, or a bird just ran into my window. So a cat didn't jump on my head, but we did have a bird run into my window. So anyway, I started with a pretty thin set of data, and then I realized, man, I have to do a lot of research to engage in like an authentic and personalized way. So now I've started to kind of like revamp the process to collect more data on prospects. So using outsourced teams, virtual assistant type stuff to actually fill in more custom fields. Like I actually even want to know like where people work last. I want to be able to like build custom images on people. I want to like have all their LinkedIn profiles. Like I want a deeper sort of view on each prospect before I open up that record and send the first email. Right. So I think that helps both if they're in like an automated flow, that helps a ton, because then it's beyond just like, hey, Morgan, I see that you work at company A and use Salesforce.com, and you work with other companies that use Salesforce.com. That level just is probably not breaking through the noise. So I think if we have more coverage on the person, then we can do better like automation, and we can also do a faster, better personalized touch when we're actually like going to reach out one-on-one.
Yeah, and that's important, because you want to make sure that you're generating those relationships, which I feel like a question there is, do you feel like you had to actually do more relationship building off of your outreach to feel like you're a genuine human? Like what was that process like?
Yeah, I didn't feel like it was a lot of relationship building, but I felt like I had to be ready to like answer questions and be like responsive and sort of service orientation almost.
Really quick rapport building is essentially.
Yeah, like rapport building. I don't even know the lingo of this stuff. That's how new I am to it. But to me, that was a little bit of a surprise, because I was kind of like, I'm going to tell you our value prop. I'm going to make it relevant for you, and then you're going to book a meeting. That actually wasn't what happened, right? People would be like, well, what's your pricing? How does that work? What's the implementation? Like, can you tell me more? And so I felt like it was very important to actually be responsive. And I think, to your point, rapport building was a big part of it.
Did you feel like the objections you were getting, you didn't feel like they were like let's say like you called someone, they're like, oh, I'm walking to a meeting, or like they don't have budget. Like, how would you handle those objections, knowing that most of those objections aren't real objections?
I didn't get a lot of that kind of objection. I got more like questions, like poking, like, why would I do this? Or what's the setup? Or what's it going to mean for me? So my approach was just try to be very direct and fast in my answers. I don't know if that's right or wrong. That's just how I tried to tackle it.
There's no right or wrong on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I talked to a lot of people as I was going, and some people are like, when you get those, you need to like, pick up the phone, like try not to get into a big email exchange or try to drive toward the meeting. Like, remember, you're selling the meeting. But I tried to balance that with a little bit of a just like service orientation. Like, what would I as a CEO want my rep to do in this scenario? So I tried to balance that out a little bit through the process, but I don't know what the magic formula is there.
Yeah, I think it depends on most people, because when I see a response that's like, send me information, or I'm not interested at this time, or I don't have the budget for it, most of the time when people reply, their office number and their mobile phone is in that signature, and I call it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, whoa, like I didn't expect you to call me. And I was like, well, it's in there. Like, you might want to remove it because I'm talking. So, but that's my mentality, because I'd rather hash it out on the phone for 5 minutes than hash it out with you on an email for a week. That's just taking too long, and also you're wasting your time. But if you can get someone right there, you have their direct dial, you have their office, I'll keep calling you till I can get an actual real answer from you. And I can tell on the phone by your tone that either you're lying to me or this is actually a real priority. So that's my advice on really how to handle those type of objections. But what happens for the most part is people don't do that because they're afraid of the phone, or they don't like the phone. So they're like, I'm just going to text, or I'm just going to go ahead and send an email back. So I think it does depend on the person though.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm definitely afraid of the phone. I mean, I think it's natural. So I love that though. I think, what I always try to do with this when I'm kind of thinking about our tactics is like flip it around. I get a lot of cold emails myself. I get a lot of cold calls. I'm like, what would work for me? And, in that case, if somebody called me up for my signature and just hashed it out over 5 minutes, if I was like, I'm not interested right now, and they're like, hey, do you want me to reach out in a quarter, in 6 months, in a year? That's actually totally good for me. It's the same sort of level of investment for me as the buyer. So
yeah,
I got to try more stuff, Morgan. I got to see. I'm glad we're having this chat.
Yeah, no. I think the biggest thing for me is when I was an SDR, I think I was probably seen as the craziest person because I would say the most outlandish things, and I would try the most outlandish things because I was like, if something works consistently that no one's ever seen before, I'm going to use it and leverage it. So there was a ton of times, like even on the phone, like this is a tip right here for people who are listening, and even for you, Adam, is if someone told me that they were walking into a meeting, I'd be like, great, I'm walking into a meeting too. So I got a couple of seconds to talk to you. So like, I would just say crazy things that they'd be like, what is going on? So I think you have to, as an SDR, what I've learned is you have to interrupt their patterns as much as possible and say things that most people wouldn't say. And don't be crazy, like pull up something that's insane, but say something that's going to resonate with them, with their business, like be serious about it, but also have levity that allows them to laugh or allows them to be like, okay, I wasn't expecting that. So that's how you really have to handle those objections.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's like, I can tell that's you, right? You know how to bring levity to a situation. You know how to be like fast on your feet in those scenarios. I think another thing I learned is you got to be yourself in this.
Of course.
Like anytime I tried to follow a playbook or somebody else's template, it just felt awkward and it just came out wrong. And anytime I just did like, hey, well, all right, I'm just going to write this how I would write it, or I'm going to, answer my way. I think it lands better because you're being a human, you're being yourself, and, your prospect then connects with that better. So exactly. I think like finding your tone, your approach is so big on this stuff.
Yeah, you have to find your confidence in your structure and your foundation. Because like I said, the stuff that I say, I really don't expect most people to say it because you got to say it in a certain way or it's going to completely blindside you. And also there's some things that people say like that I'm like, I would never say that. I just don't like the way they say that. So yeah, you got to find you within your own foundation, but you also have to be able to handle objections and challenge in a way that's respectful and not disrespectful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like creativity is really important. I think I probably would have under-indexed creativity in our hiring process when we actually go build out a team, and now I will over-index creativity just because what I learned is, each of these situations is a little bit different, and the more creative you can be in how you engage somebody and the angle you take, I think that's everything. So I'm going to think about that a lot more when we actually like start building out our team here.
Yeah, no, I think that's super applicable. I know tons of reps that I've managed, and when they were creative, they came up with a lot of great solutions and messages that really translated. So kind of going into the next question though, is when you were in this venture, you were obviously faced a lot of things you've already talked about. What was the one thing that blindsided you when you started that you were not ready for besides the data?
Yeah, besides the data, how hard it is to write for outbound. Like, I've done a lot of writing, and I've done a lot of marketing writing, like over the years, like websites and product marketing, collateral and ads and all that.
Yeah.
And I've tried to learn, like, I like that stuff a lot. So I've tried to learn about it throughout my career. And it's just so different. I mean, I actually remember this conversation I had with Ryan O'Hara over at Lead IQ. He was super helpful to me early in the days. And he just like totally helped me pull my head out of my ass. And this is more like HBO than ABC, which is good, Morgan. I like that. So he like totally helped me pull my head out of my ass on like my emails at first they were long and they were like, looked like marketing and like, you know, all the sub value props. And he's like, man, this is really long. And he said it nice, but really what he was saying is, man, this is terrible. Yes. And I really had to rethink the way I kind of like crafted a message for this medium, because it's totally different when you're going to interrupt somebody and when you have to be concise and when they're probably just flipping through this on their phone on the bus or like walking between meetings, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you got to make sure that you're structured in a way that it's going to resonate. And I think one of the things a lot of people don't realize is like, you know, this phone is where the majority of people are looking at their emails. And I think I saw a stat, it was 80 to 85% of people view their email on their phone. So when you write an email, you don't want to write a novel. You don't want to write the next bestseller. All you're trying to do is write an email that's going to resonate with someone so they respond. And it could be really quick. So that's how I write my emails. They're like super short, but they're to the point of what I'm trying to get, because people want to make sure that their time's their valuable asset and they don't want to spend 5 minutes reading an email.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is something that SDRs and salespeople need to push back on your marketing team and your management about. Because like, if your management and your marketing team is wired like me, right? Like, I'm obsessed with my own product. I freaking love it. I think it's the greatest. I love my market. I love my customer, right? So my default is just to be like, I want to tell you everything. And this template is going to be like so glorious. And like the frontline people need to push back and be like, no, like these people are not in the mindset to consume the message that you, like CEO who, you know, built this company, wants to deliver.
Yeah. No, that's the thing is I think even as just people who profess a message or are building a brand want to be like, all right, this is what everything is about. And you want to tell the world about it and you want to have a grand message. But at the end of the day, the prospect's like, I don't have time for the grand message, because that's going to be illustrated throughout the sales cycle, but not at the beginning, which is that you have to tie the bow on a certain way that the present is like a little small gift that they can take and it'll gravitate to something, instead of just like this humongous present that they're overwhelmed by.
I love that. Yeah, it's a great way of saying it. I mean, it's like, in some ways, it's like the opposite of writing a VC pitch deck or like a product brief. It's like, you really just have to like get these bite-sized like hooks and gain that, earn that attention. I think that's really your goal, right?
Yeah, 100%. So when you were looking at this role, you're going into it, you're doing your thing, you're reaching out. Do you encourage other CEOs to do what you did?
Oh, for sure, man. I think it's a little weird. It's a little crazy, right? But especially if you're a hands-on learner, I think it's so valuable. Like, I have a harder time learning sort of through other people. So I like to, you know, get my hands onto things. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, like, I think just it'll help be a better CEO, because what happens is you get your finger on the pulse. Like, even if you did it for, you know, 5 hours in 1 month, let's say, and you just like, okay, 1 hour a week, I'm going to do this. You're going to get some responses. You're going to see who doesn't respond. You're going to have that feel of like reaching out and what happens next. And you really do get an interesting pulse of the market and like, what are people bringing up? What are the objections? What competitors are they mentioning? So I think in that regard, it's super valuable. And I think as a CEO, you kind of have potentially the chance to ask a follow-up question that your SDR might not get an answer to. So if you're like, you know, I'm the CEO here, and can you give me a little more color on that? Like, why is pricing an issue for you? Or why did you decide to deprioritize this over the quarter? You can actually like get some good business intelligence out of it, I think.
Yeah, you can definitely, because the front lines is where you're going to learn the most information. I found that as an SDR is when you're making those calls every single day, you know more about the market and the customers that you're passing over than essentially anyone else in the business, because you're having all the objections, you're learning about new competitors that no one has even heard of in their life. So it is important to get in the front lines, as Adam is saying, because it's going to help you become better from a strategic level of what exactly is going on.
For sure. I'd encourage people in marketing to do it too, just because I think the way the world's going, ABM, right, like just the way B2B looks now, everything. So much more. Yeah, it's everything, all about that, right? But that sales and marketing alignment, so much more, and so much more of marketing activity is about enabling your sales team to be effective. So I'd encourage marketers to build this muscle too, to some extent.
Yeah. So essentially what I'm saying is everyone needs to be an SDR at least for 3 months so you can understand how it is.
I don't know about 3 months, man. You need, not all of us are wired to handle getting ghosted that much. So some of us have little fragile egos we need to protect.
Jeez, it's a mental grind, what I tell people. So I know that you probably went through the same thing as you were getting ghosted and no one was answering you and what is going on? How did you keep yourself motivated through that time?
So one of the things I did is I actually just took screenshots of all the nice replies that people got. Cause when you're authentic and when you're doing good personalization, you occasionally get somebody right back and say, hey, this was a great email, or thanks for doing that. Because I think buyers now are a little annoyed by the bad stuff they see. Yeah. And so they will recognize you when you do something good. So I just kind of saved those and said, all right, I'm not totally crazy doing this. We are having a positive effect on some people. That was one thing. And the other thing was just remembering that everybody's busy. Everybody's got priorities for the quarter. Everybody's got priorities for the day, and they're busy. And so, my number one priority is trying to get to them, but their number one priority is not responding to me. So just remembering that it's a long game, really, and gaining attention is, a long process that has to be earned.
Yeah, it does have to be earned, and you have to put yourself out there. And when you get a response, definitely feel good about that. I actually really like that idea about having a folder of all the nice replies that you get, because because everyone gets in you've probably been there. It's and I've been there. It's you do all the phone calls, you do everything as you normally do. You do all the emails as you normally do, and you get nothing. And then you think you're the worst salesperson of all time. So it happens to everybody.
Yeah. And why is it? I mean, some weeks you're doing the same thing, and then, 1 week it's great and you're getting tons of engagement, and the next week it's not. And it's just, who knows, the people that you reached out to, their kid was sick. There's just so many things happening. So I think playing that long game and remembering that, you can break through, and then not getting lazy, not letting that just half-ass your activities from there. Yeah. It's probably pretty critical.
So what was the best response that you got?
Oh gosh. I did this custom image for somebody, and she responded and was like, I love this email in so many ways. And we ended up booking a meeting. So that was the best response. I did have some people be nice in saying no. Yeah. But those aren't as good because they're still saying no. Yeah. So I think the best response, and I was really psyched about this, kind of building out these custom images for people that sort of articulated what our product did, but relevant to them. And so getting a response on that was very validating and motivating to be let's go do more of this. This is great.
Yeah. And that's important, because I think the reason I asked that question is because everyone knows that one email that they got that was relevant. So as long as you have something like that, that means you're doing your job. Not every single person is going to resonate with something awesome. There's always emails where I was this is the best email ever. And then they don't even respond. And I'm how in the world did they not respond? That was incredible. So, but sometimes they could be busy. Sometimes it just doesn't resonate. It just completely isn't even their priorities. You never know why that person didn't respond. So don't ever feel bad about when someone does not respond. Always feel good when someone does respond, because it puts you in a good light. It means you're doing your job. And I think that's the hardest thing about the BDR SDR role is you really get your high and satisfaction off of doing good work from a phone call or an email. And you need to make sure that you hold that on a pedestal so you don't get yourself down and out and you're depressed.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Because it fluctuates. It goes up and down. Yeah. And I think we all want to look at the metrics and response rates and how many meetings do we book. But I think some of those qualitative data points, if you're trying something new, if you're taking some risk, getting some early validation, or on the other side of it, if you're getting negative stuff, if you're getting opt-outs, like, I think reading into those and really like tuning into those kind of qualitative data points is important.
It is. It's very important because you have to understand how the data is going to correlate and what messages that you're going to do at the end of the day. So I got one final question two more final questions for you before we wrap this whole thing up. So you talked a lot about social selling. You talked about being on social media. What is your preference on the personalized LinkedIn invitation? And did you leverage it as an SDR?
You know, I guess I did a little bit. So the way that I generally would connect with people on LinkedIn is just try to connect. I wouldn't try to say anything about the product.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to connect and just sort of like be like, hey, I'm here in the world, kind of a thing. And I don't know, I didn't have any science behind this. It was just sort of an intuition, because I get pitched a lot. Like, I'll accept a lot of people's invites, and then right away they'll pitch. And I don't love that. So I just send a quick personalized message that was like, hey, it looks like we know a lot of the same people, or we're in a common space, or something to that effect, and say, hey, I'd love to connect. And I wouldn't ever, reach out to them after that. I just like, no, I'll follow your content, you'll follow mine, and now I can kind of see what's going on in your world. And that was my strategy. I don't know. What do you do? You probably said this, but
I know. Yeah, I know. I mean, if you don't want, but like this is something that I believe in, because what you just said is the reason why most people fail and don't like LinkedIn, and why they just have completely stopped doing invitations. So a couple things I want to touch on. First off, I have, and you probably have way more than me, I have like 750 pending invitations, and I'm keeping store of them because I want to see how many people just send me invitations without any personalized invitation. So if they're not, I mean, if this says like sales development, or like I actually know the person and they didn't send me something, okay, cool, I'll accept. But for the most part, it's a ton of people I have no idea why they're connected with me, and they have no context. And so the reason that people don't get their acceptance on their LinkedIn invitations because there's nothing there. Why would I accept you if you're not going to tell me something? So another big thing is what I do is I send out a personalized invitation, and it's like, hi, first name. Looks like you have a lot of experience in whatever industry I'm targeting, or whatever job title it is. Would love to connect with you as my career continues to advance. Looking forward to connecting with you. So as soon as they connect, that's it. I don't send them a message. I don't do anything. But because what my thing is, and you make content, so you'll get this, is if I make content and I'm posting, eventually they're going to see my posts, and they're going to be like, oh, what, this person knows what they're talking about in this type of field. So either they're going to reach out to me and say, or respond to an email that I'm sending them, and they're going to be like, okay, I want to talk to you about your service you're providing, or they're just going to be in the loop, and maybe they know someone else who needs my service or the content that I'm providing. So that's how I treat LinkedIn. I never send an email or a message about my service or product unless they message me and ask me. Then I'll like, okay, we can go into that conversation. But I see the LinkedIn personalized invitation as just another touch point to let you know that I am a real person and I'm not a robot spamming you through automation.
Yeah.
So that's how I think about LinkedIn invitations.
Right. No, that's how, yeah. So we're very aligned on that.
Very
and
aligned.
The idea is, hopefully, now a month later, they accepted your connection. You haven't like messaged them on LinkedIn. Maybe you send a cold email or place a call to them, right? Maybe they've seen your posts, right? Like, that's sort of the ideal. Now they have a little bit of awareness of who you are or what you're about. Now maybe they're sort of leaning in to read your message rather than sort of leaning toward the archive button.
Exactly, and that's the exact opposite of what you want. You don't want them to put you in the archive. You want them to respond to what you're saying and reply to you and put yourself in the right direction. So Adam, thank you so much for hopping on the SDR Chronicles today. The last question I ask every single guest that comes on the show is, what is the number one piece of advice that you have for SDRs as they enter into their new role?
Be yourself. That's it. I mean, be yourself in how you reach out and what you do. You'll have templates, you'll have playbooks, but forge your own path. I think that's how you get a result. If you don't do that, it's just going to come off as, forced or tight, or it just won't feel right to the prospect. So that's what I'd say.
Awesome. Well, Adam, thank you so much for coming on the SDR Chronicles. As I always say, guys, keep dialing, and I'll see you guys soon.